Hi, Andrew from Sachs, and welcome to video number 7 in our 7-video series on teamwork. And in this one, we'll talk about specific techniques to try to build teamwork. So a key message that I want to give you is that it's the local that matters in all of this. The job, the team, and the leader. And those are things that are proximal to the person. Proximal means close to me. So my job is close to me because I'm immersed in it every day. My team is close to me because I'm working with them every day. And my immediate leader is close to me because that's the person who I work with and report to every day. So those proximal things have a big impact on my well-being and productivity. And in fact, about 80% of people's well-being and productivity comes from their immediate team. So if they're in a team of 5 people in an organisation of 1,000 people, 80% of their well-being and productivity comes from that 5 people, and only 20% comes from the rest of the 1,000 people. So culture is local. Now, the thing that we have to understand is therefore local leadership can be incredibly powerful in causing a group to coalesce as a team, to work together effectively as a team, and can also do the opposite, can sponsor an environment where there's internal disharmony or disputes or whatever. So let's focus on the things that cause teams to be more successful. Here's some specific activities that were identified in a big study done by Lacarenza and colleagues in 2018. Teamwork, learning and development. If you've seen some of the earlier videos in this sequence, you may remember where I took you through research findings about what are the various roles of various team members. So we talked about the fact that certain team members have a social function to fulfill, to cause the group to be kind of positive from a social point of view and supportive, and also to deal with conflict so that that's headed off rather than allowed to fester in the team environment. There are also roles which are about clarity of purpose, and there are roles about, for instance, the degree to which we measure our progress and measure the quality of what we do. So teamwork, learning and development is really learning and development that helps people to build those skills that cause the team to be self-sustaining. So that's one of the things that Lacarenza was able to demonstrate does help. Teaching people their roles, the roles of effective team members, and causing them to almost identify, all right, well, I'll take on this role, and that will cause the team to be much more self-supporting. An additional benefit of this approach is that it then relies less heavily on one leader. In other words, we don't have just one leader. We've got a leader who is ahead, and we've identified earlier in the series of videos that that is an important thing. But then it should be clear, well, if this person's good at the social stuff, why not make them a leader of that? If this person's good at the monitoring, why not make them a leader of that? So you can have multiple leadership roles. And it's sometimes said that if you have an optimum corporate culture, it's a culture where everybody acts as a leader. They all see that they have a role to pull the group together and to ensure that we achieve high levels of well-being and productivity. The second thing is leadership development. Now, we've talked about leadership and its crucial function in pulling a team together. And in a couple of slides' time, I'm going to show you some ideas about leadership, particularly something that's called transformational or facilitative leadership, which is a contemporary perspective on leadership where you kind of unboss to a certain extent. In other words, you're not expected to be the top-down leader all the time. You're a facilitator of people within that team taking more individual and group responsibility to get stuff done. So leadership development can make a difference to team cohesiveness. Team building activities. The most important thing to understand about team building activities is you've all heard of people going away on bungee jumping trips or whitewater rafting or whatever, doing activities out in the park where you're going to build a bridge to get over some kind of an obstacle or something like that. If you want to do that, do it. But it doesn't work very well. Proximal, distal. If you want to cause big improvements at work, then do it at work. And one of the most powerful things that you can do is to cause a group of people to come together to either solve a problem that exists in the workplace or to pursue an opportunity to exist in the workplace, particularly if the leader is facilitative in doing so, where the leader sponsors an approach that's created from the staff and then supports that. So the leader doesn't bring a solution. The leader really brings a process that will cause the solution to develop from the staff. incredibly powerful team development activity. And yes, go bungee jumping if you want. But the problem is that if you go, there's an old saying, if you go to a motivational speech, the period that the motivation leaves can last as long as it takes you to get out into the car park and find that you've got a flat tire. If you do something that's work related and make it about improvement at work, and especially if you've recruited people who care about their work, then that tends to be more enduring. That's a key element of team building. Group-based team building activities which relate to why we come to work are more powerful and enduring. Now let's talk about leader behaviours. Now these are the results of a particular study that we undertook some years ago at SACS in partnership with Deakin University, as a matter of fact. And then we measured leader behaviours that seem to have an influence on the levels of engagement of staff. There are things like creating a learning environment, being supportive, fostering teamwork, where a leader consciously asks people to work together rather than individualistically. So that's a key leadership skill about causing the team to be more like a team. In other words, if a leader says, hey, Bill, could you do this? Hey, Mary, can you do this? And hey, Jane, can you do this? That's individualistic leadership. A teamwork leader says, hey, Bill, Mary, and Jane, we've got an opportunity here, or we've got a problem here. Can you guys get together and come up with some suggestions about how to solve it? That's a way of sponsoring teamwork activities. The fourth one is empowerment. And it turns out that of all the things that a leader can do, empowerment is the one that causes the greatest improvement in engagement. So top-down leadership, where you're telling everybody what to do, that's not good for creating teamwork, because it sort of implies, well, you have to obey what I say. Whereas if you sponsor the idea that leaders within the existing team will come forward and come up with solutions that the whole team supports, that's very powerful. And it's also courageous, if you want to put it that way, from the leader, because it's demonstrating, hey, I'm not precious about where the ideas come from. So empowerment is a really powerful way of creating effective teams. Then we're talking about creating clarity about appropriate behaviours and effective management of behaviour. So this is creating clarity and this is doing something about it. Creating clarity about performance standards and effective management of underperformance. And I guess those four demonstrate that good leaders do have to be accountable. They have to make sure that the team meets its goals, and they have to make sure that the team behaves in an appropriate fashion. And so what those two things do in combination is that they ensure that the team reaches its goals, but also you have a psychosocially positive and safe environment. Key role of leadership. Now, as mentioned in earlier videos, you can't have an optimum teamwork environment if you're getting negative behaviours or negative performance. The final two are celebrating success and optimism and positivity. So leaders have to be prepared to be positive, optimistic, and focus on the better things that the organisation has or the team has achieved. If you look at the mathematics here, and I won't bore you with the mathematics, but 4 of these behaviours have shown themselves to be most important in creating a high engagement environment. Empowerment, optimism and positivity, being supportive and creating a learning environment. Now I'll talk about those 4 specific leadership behaviours in the context of this thing called facilitative leadership. But one of the things that's really important for a team to feel like they're a team is clarity. Clarity about what we're seeking to achieve. Clarity about our roles. And there is no better way of doing that than through outcomes. This slide demonstrates what we're calling cascading of strategic intent. If you read the strategy of most organisations, the strategic intent is vague because the strategy document is vague. An alternative to having a vague strategy document is to create a list of outcomes, and I'm going to recommend 7 or less outcomes that this organisation needs to achieve. By the way, you might have 20 indicators to measure those 7 outcomes, but outcomes give clarity of purpose to people. Now, if you've got clarity at an organisational level, these are the outcomes, the measurable outcomes that we're going to pursue. So the outcomes could be something to do with customer satisfaction, or it could be a certain profit level or a certain growth level or a certain level of compliance to legislation, whatever. I mean, whenever we've worked with groups to develop these, they've had no problem to develop them, but in almost every case, they didn't have them before they undertook this exercise. So this job definition process through outcomes starts at the organisational level, and then it can be cascaded That's why we call it cascading of strategic intent down to the groups or departments or divisions, whatever you want to call them, and then to the branches, and then to the individuals. Now, you'll see that we're using the term real-world outcomes. Now, the reason that we're calling them real-world outcomes is to make it different from micro KPIs or key result areas or whatever you want to call them, those dozens and dozens of micro things. So the concept is, if you have role clarity as an individual, what you really should be doing is that you should be part of a team where we know, let's say 5, 6 or 7 measurable outcomes for this team, and we know how we're tracking against those outcomes. That creates clarity. Teams work better when they know what they're trying to achieve. And I'll give you an example. For instance, we work a lot with human resources managers, human resources directors. And you know what? When you look at their job descriptions, almost none of them have customer satisfaction on them. Internal customer satisfaction. But isn't that what everybody wants out of any corporate role? Well, you know, I've got a problem in HR, help me solve the problem. Or I've got an opportunity that I'd like to pursue, or I need to recruit somebody, or I've got to deal with an IR issue. They want to be satisfied with the service that's being provided. That's an outcome. And very often, organisations define the roles of individuals and groups in terms of tasks, what they need to do. But if you create a clarity about what needs to be achieved, it's far easier for people to pull together behind that goal because the goal becomes clear. We know what we're heading towards. So that's a really important point. If you want an effective, cohesive team, give them clarity of goals, and even better, cause them to work together to build that clarity of goals. What are the goals that we need to achieve? How can we serve the purposes of this organisation in our team? And let's work out 7, 5, 6, whatever number of measurable outcomes and how we're going to measure those outcomes. That will help with teamwork. 3 models of leadership. What we're saying here is that there is top-down leadership where a leader needs to tell people what to do, and that has to happen, doesn't it? If somebody turns up for their first day at work, you're not going to say to them, well, what do you want to do? You're going to say to them, well, here's your desk, or here's your sign up for our intranet or whatever, and I've got a meeting with you at 10 o'clock, boss type stuff. And it's very appropriate. Even with a very mature and experienced staff member, there may be times where you have to say, well, look, I'm sorry, this bit's not negotiable. We have to do this. That's, again, boss type behaviour. The second model of leadership is what we call consultation, and that's where you'll go and ask people's opinions, and your opinion will be swayed by their opinions, but you'll still make up your own mind about what needs to be done. So that's, again, a kind of a boss behaviour, but tempered with the opinions of other people, and good leaders need to do that. The third model is facilitative leadership, and you'll see that this person is facilitating a group of 10 people. And what you're doing then is the leader doesn't bring the solution. The leader brings a methodology, an approach, and the approach is a facilitative approach. And so this leader has got 10 people together in the one spot, and the spot could be a physical spot, like a room, or it could be a digital spot, like a Zoom or Teams meeting. And the challenge or opportunity is presented to the group, and you cause them to split into subgroups like a breakout room activity, and they discuss the options of solving this problem, and then the leader supports the solution that they come up with. By the way, the quickest way to do this is to do it with democracy. So you get people to come up with ideas, a brainstorming activity, how are we going to make this work? And then what you do is you give people an opportunity to vote for the various ideas that have been generated. And the solution or solutions that get the greatest number of votes, then you implement them. And good facilitative leaders don't do the implementation themselves. They may well encourage one or more staff members to work on that implementation. So you've got a combination of empowerment as well as accountability. The accountability stuff is, look, you need to get this done. We've agreed that this will be done by the end of July, so let's make sure that that time frame is complied with. And that's an environment in which people learn. It's certainly empowering. It's optimistic and positive because you are putting your faith in those people to come up with a solution. And of course, it's supportive as well because you are demonstrating to people that you value them by doing this kind of an approach. Good leaders do need to be able to be at the top down, at the consultative, and at the facilitative levels from time to time. And they need to judge when it's appropriate to do so. By the way, I think facilitative leadership is at its best when the issue is most contentious. You tell people up front, this is how we're going to decide this issue. We are going to get you to come up with solutions, and you will vote for those solutions, and 51% wins. This will be democratic. So on this slide, we give a simple approach to neuroscience-based coaching of a group, or an individual for that matter. And you'll notice that there's an acronym here, DROP, D-R-O-P, destination setting. So this is a technique for facilitative leadership. Imagine that you've got an opportunity that needs to be pursued or a challenge that needs to be solved by a group. One of the most powerful things that you can do before you set about the process of solving the problem is to create, through facilitation, a destination. A destination is an end point. And a good way of doing this is a 5 words or phrases exercise, which says, all right, well, after we've solved this problem or after we've pursued this opportunity, come up with 5 words or phrases that would describe success. And you can get each individual to do that, but then form into small groups to discuss them. Now, when you pull those ideas together, you'll often find, once more, between, let's say, 5 and 9 themes for success. So we've done this in helping organisations to restructure their organisations. And, well, one of the things that you should do if you're going to restructure is let's define what a good structure looks like before we set off the process of actually designing the structure. So people come up with ideas like simple and easy to understand and no duplication and empowering and those kinds of things. So you start out with a destination. The R is for reality checking. And the reality checking bit is how far are we from that destination? And I quite often get people to rate out of 10 the current situation. 10 means perfect, nothing needs to change. 0 is bad as possible. The number that they give you as a group can be really powerful. So you get them to do it individually and you average them. And if you're anything less than about 7, that suggests change needs to be made. So that's a useful reality check. You might also ask them, what would be an acceptable rating after we've done this improvement? And if they say, all right, we're currently a 3 and we need to be an 8, well, that implies big change. If we're a 7 and we need to be a 7.5, well, that's tinkering and fine-tuning, isn't it? And that's a good way of getting a reality check about where we are now. We quite often use this technique, by the way, if we've run 360-degree feedback or some kind of a well-being survey. The O is for option creation. And option creation is really where you get the group, and as I said, if it's a group of people of anywhere between sort of 10 and several hundred, I've done it with groups of 15 in a total group of 250, for instance. What you then get them to do is each group comes up with as many creative ideas as possible. That's option creation. And then the final bit is planning, doing, and reflecting. And what you do is you get people to look at the various options that have been created and to vote for their favourite options. So if it's a large group, you might give them 1 vote for their favourite option. If it's a smaller group, you might give them 3 votes for their favourite option, 2 votes for their second favourite option, 1 vote for their third favourite option. So the benefit is that you've created these solutions from the group of people and then you've got them to decide which of these options they want to pursue. Very powerful. And that of itself tends to make teams more self-sufficient and it tends to pull them together. And the more you do this, of course, the more they learn this drop technique themselves. So there's a brief whip around the world of organisational psychology. Firstly, teamwork does matter. People get human benefits from it and well-being benefits from it, but organisations get productivity benefits from it. Second, we know that there are certain types of individuals who are more suited to causing teams to be more cohesive, and so therefore you can recruit for teamwork. And finally, we've given you some practical ideas about how to lead teams to be more effective from the point of view of cohesion. Thanks for joining us, and if you'd like to explore any of these ideas in greater depth, please don't hesitate to be in contact with SACS and we'll do what we can to help.